Hi, all you music lovers. My name is Andy Rodriguez, also known as the Blackspinner. And it's been a while since I made a video. It's been probably about a week. And that's a long time for me. Lately, I've been a little busy doing things on Facebook right now. And in fact, I am doing live shows on Friday nights at 10, where I play my records on this page called Records and Beers Live. And catch me there on Friday nights at 10 p.m. Central. I hope that you're able to join us. And as we've been going through this journey, what I've been doing is that I've been going through my vinyl, through A through Z, and I had a couple special shows. Well, today we're going to have a very special show as well. Today's show, I pulled out some debut albums in my record collection that had a big significance or historical meaning in the world of rock music. We are going to talk about these albums. I might pick out a song that was very important in each album that catapulted the band towards their future, because this was their debut albums. So we are going to talk about them. I have all these, which y'all know, in chronological order, so that we see the way that music has changed from the early 60s to I believe I go to the early 2000s on here, from Bob Dylan's debut to the Strokes debut and everything in between that I have. So let's get started. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also give me a thumbs up. And so let's get started. The first debut album that I have here is Bob Dylan's Bob Dylan. Now, this was a big album. This was released in 1962. No, I'm sorry, this was not a big album, but it led to the career that we see now, to everything that he's done from 1962 up till today. We followed his career, his ups, his downs, his changes in genre, his changes in the music that he made, from going to just acoustic songs to coming out with Bring It All Back Home, where he starts to introduce electric music into his music. And then Blonde on Blonde, the double album that just blew the doors wide open to a lot of different bands. A lot of people say that was the first double album. Some say it was Frank Zappa's double live album. Freak Out being the first double album. But either way, this was, I guess we can easily look it up and see which month was released. But yeah, this was a big movement for Bob Dylan moving forward. This was a big step. And next, in 1963, this bad boy was released. That's right, the Beatles, Please Please Me. And this we know will be the beginning of in my opinion, the greatest band ever. They will always be number one in my heart today, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Number two changes for me, but number one will never change. It is the Beatles with Please Please Me. Now, Please Please Me started a whole change in music and in culture and in fashion. This was the beginning of Beatlemania that will explode in February of '64, with the Beatles coming to America and appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show. This was recorded, I believe, in 9 hours and released. And this will be the beginning of everything else that was released, not just the Beatles, but just everything in music that was released after this. After that, we will have the media called them the Beatles rivals. I guess they were rivals, but they were friendly rivals sometimes. But the Rolling Stones debut album, the Hitmakers, the Rolling Stones, and I kept on forgetting about songs that I was gonna talk about, but Please Please Me had Love Me Do on there. That was a big hit for them. And for the Rolling Stones, this one had a lot of covers, but they made it in a way of in a Rolling Stones kind of sound to it. This has a lot of covers on there. The song on here, Not Fade Away, which was a Buddy Holly song that they kind of made it their own with their chug 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 sound. So yeah, the Rolling Stones, this was their debut album, England's newest hit makers. And after that, we had a duo that came out in 1960. I think this was 64 or 65. Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m. by Simon and Garfunkel. Now, where Bob Dylan started to leave the folk music at this time, Simon and Garfunkel were just embracing it. And they will take it to different levels. Not to the levels that Bob Dylan did it, but to the levels of their own comfort zone. And they basically stayed mainly with acoustic instruments, unlike Bob Dylan that just went off a different way. But Simon and Garfunkel tried to stay true to their folk roots, but still trying to appeal to commercial success as well. The song on here, this has a very early version of The Sound of Silence, which is done differently on the next release, but this is more of an acoustic release. And I believe this was 65. The Byrds, their debut album by the Byrds. This one here came out in 65. This was adding a little bit of rock into folk. So this was folk rock for the West Coast. This came out in California. There was a big movement going on at that time. A lot of songs on here were remakes, but more than half were also originals. But the big hit song here that made the Byrds stars were their version of Mr. Tambourine Man, which was a Bob Dylan original, which Bob Dylan did it in 64 on Bring It All Back Home, but his is an acoustic and longer version. The Byrds tighten it up, make it a little bit rockin', and shorten up the lyrics. They do omit several verses. But yeah, Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds. And in 1966, the world will be introduced. Well, maybe not the world. The country will be introduced to the Monkees through a TV show. They started off as a manufactured pop group that did a TV show, but early on, after that stamp that they put on them, they surely and quickly disposed of that to let the music world know that, hey, we are individuals, we are musicians, and they will show off their chops and musicianship down the road. This was the first album. The second album was more with the Monkees, but by their third headquarters, they did have almost full control of their music. Their TV show ended, but their music career kept going, and rightfully so, because they did a lot of good stuff. This is their debut album by the Monkees, and of course, the hit song off of here was going to be the theme song for the TV show, the Hey Hey We're the Monkees, which is also on here, which starts off the album. Let me get that microphone out of my way so we can see the albums a little bit better. I got a bigger stack on here, that's why, than usual. And I was talking about Frank Zappa. His debut album was is a double album. Freak Out and Stick Out. Of course, this was not a commercial release like the others were, of course not. But this did start a revolution in tape loops and being able to throw all kinds of music into popular recordings, which led also to the Beatles doing Sgt. Pepper, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, And Frank Zappa was in the middle of all that with this double album. The songs on here that might have stick out, because they sure weren't hits for them. I would pick, I talked about this, how there's so much to choose from. I'll just name a few. Of course, Who Are the Brain Police, but Trouble Every Day. I love that song, Trouble Every Day. It talks about the revolution going on. It talked about, he wrote that song during the Watts riots in LA of 66 or 65, and what was going on his television, what was going on in the news, and it's a great song. And after that came 1966. We're still in 66. Fresh Cream by Cream. This was a very big song for a very big album, not just for Cream, but for the whole landscape of what was going to be hard English blues that's going to come out after this. This might have been still in the same vein as the Yardbirds, but Cream also threw a nice dose of psychedelia and hard psychedelia into this. The song that sticks out on this one, it's going to be, for me, I Feel Free, which was a hit song. And hit songs, some people don't like the hit songs, some people like the deep tracks, but if it wasn't for hit songs, a lot of these bands would not be able to move on to more projects. So hit songs or single releases are very important, very important. And also in the same year of 1966, I believe, the Doors came out with their debut album. This, this came out of LA, and it seems like whatever was happening in England, the next step was going to be happening in LA, with their own American twist to it, which is fine with that. The song on here that will make them legends, of course, would be Light My Fire, which was a very big hit for them. Of course, their album has almost a 7-minute long song, and of course they condensed it down so they could be played on the radio, so that they can perform it on TV and on these TV shows. But the original long version on the album is the best version ever. That's great. And I believe we are in 1967. We're talking about Pink Floyd. On this one, if y'all saw my Pink Floyd episode, I've got the A Nice Pair compilation, which has this and A Saucer Full of Secrets. So I took out the cover, the insert sleeve for it, and this is it. So this is the cover that I have for Pipers at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd in 1967, done in Abbey Road Studios. This will have the original band still with Syd Barrett. David Gilmour has not arrived yet. He will arrive for the next album, and their careers will continue on. The song on here that sticks out to me is Interstellar Overdrive, and this will start a revolution again. I picked out these debut albums because they're all going to start some kind of movement, and this will start the prog movement, the movement of keyboards and guitars intertwining with lyrics about science fiction, or just of science fiction, and of just deeper life meaning lyrics. Let's say it like that, right? And after that, another change, another revolution. We're going to be getting into 68, and there's going to be so many releases in 1968 that made changes throughout the world, that made changes in music, and by debut artists. Let's go with Jimi Hendrix. Are You Experienced? Not only was Jimi Hendrix the best guitar player that was introduced to us at that time, but he is still talked about today as still being one of the greatest guitar players of all time. Great guitar players copy Jimi Hendrix, or maybe not copy, but take inspiration from him. And the song on here, there were so many on this debut album. So many. And Purple Haze, Hey Joe, Fire, Foxy Lady, all those were big hits for him that were staples on FM radio and probably still are today. They have not can be streamed on any rock station, classic rock station streamed, and Jimi Hendrix will pop up a lot, and especially songs off of this album. And next we have a band that didn't make quite the impression after this release. Well, maybe they did, but not as much as we had hoped they would. But Steppenwolf, I could not go making this without talking more about Steppenwolf. This song, Born to Be Wild, just took off in 1968. It defined a place in time during 1968, especially when there was so much going on, so much protests and people wanting change, and the Vietnam War was cranking, and there were so many young men and women being sent off to war, and it was hard to support them and the war and then try to protest against it. There was so much feelings going on, but we always had music. We always had music to turn back to. And these guys here, they started off as forerunners of the movement, and then they tailed off there in the 70s. But the songs on here, of course, Born to Be Wild, it was just a big hit for them. That not just produced this album, but that song, Born to Be Wild, gave Steppenwolf the green light to record for the next decade plus. Also in 1968, one of the main members of the band Buffalo Springfield will break loose. Talking about Neil Young. I did a whole episode of Neil Young. He is right now he's my number 2, and he's been my number 2 for a while, right behind the Beatles. And we all know the kind of career Neil Young has had. The kind of career that Neil Young has, just cascading and going through so many different genres of music, doing whatever he wants whenever he wants, and us fans go along for the ride, don't we? The song on here that broke out on this one for me was The Loner. The Loner just shows his need for not his need, but his craft for a melody that is different from everybody else. And also from 1968, this bad boy will come out, Led Zeppelin's debut album. Now this one here does marry blues and rock, but Led Zeppelin's really giving it that rock sound to it. We were talking about Cream in 1966, how Cream was adding the psychedelia into the blues. Led Zeppelin was throwing the rock into it, and that will be more evident in releases after this. But they released albums until 1979, so they had a nice 11-year run of original music. And this one here, the one that stands out to me, was Dazed and Confused. That song just skyrocketed them into having the permission to do whatever they want with their music, and they sure did. So Led Zeppelin 1 was another revolution album, starting a whole movement of heavy rock blues. And what we have next came out of Woodstock, New York, with their blend of music. We're talking about all these different types of music. And these guys right here, the band, will just come up with their own Americana country rock kind of sound that had been unheard of at the time. That's why this album is so important. Songs from the Big Pink. a little bio about the band. They had started off as a backing band to Ronnie Hawkins and also for Bob Dylan. So they've been playing since the late 50s. And then in 1968, they finally formed themselves and released music from the Big Pink. And the song that sticks out to me, I'm pretty sure, I think it will be I Shall Be Released, and also The Wait. Yep. And coming out of Northern California in 1968 as well will be Creedence Clearwater. Just Creedence Clearwater is all it says on here. And the back says Revival. Okay. I don't see the Revival on the front. Am I missing it? Doesn't matter. But there is the debut album for Creedence Clearwater Revival. They were so big for 3 years, releasing album after album with hit songs after hit songs. And they were so good. Loved it. And the songs on here that stuck out that moved their career forward was going to be Susie Q. Yep. And then from there, we talked about Jimmy Page with Led Zeppelin, and he came out of the Yardbirds. We talked about Eric Clapton with Cream that came out of the Yardbirds. Debut solo album, Jeff Beck, also came out with the Yardbirds. This one here has a very young Rod Stewart on vocals, and also Ron Wood on bass. Rod Wood, of course, will go on to join the Rolling Stones in the late 70s, and he is still there today. But Jeff Beck with Truth, his guitar is just amazing on this album, and this will lead for him to have a great career and moving forward, but also introducing, along with Jimi Hendrix, the guitar hero as well. The guitar player virtuoso in the same vein as Santana, which I'll talk about very, very soon, making jazz fusion albums and just combining different types of genres and still having their guitar being the focal point. And speaking of great guitarists in the vein of Jimi Hendrix, Deep Purple comes out with Richie Blackmore being their lead guitar player. That's what Jimi Hendrix did. It made us focus and change. Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, guys like that, changed what we expected from a lead guitarist. Now we want guitar solos. We want blistering long guitar solos. And right here with Richie Blackmore, he will do that later on down the road. But this is where Deep Purple starts, with a kind of mishmash, kind of. They still don't know what they want to be. Heavy, prog, pop, but all that is mishmashed into this album. The song on here, of course, that broke it out for them was Hush, and they still play that today. I saw them in concert a couple years ago, and that was actually, I believe they might have even closed the show with Hush. That's how big of a song that is off their debut album. And in 1969, Carlos Santana would be a big force on the Woodstock stage. And it's funny we're talking about that because it is August. Today is August 23rd, and Woodstock was about the third weekend of August, I believe. But Santana's debut album, we talked about this at length. If you all want more information about any of these, go to the respected letters on my previous shows. Here's Santana with his band, and just like Jeff Beck and the other guitar players, guitar heroes I talked about, taking a whole different genre, making it rock, and making their guitar the focal point. The song on here, it will have to be Evil Ways and Jingo, that just catapulted his career even farther with this debut album. So if you're catching on, all these are debut albums. All these are debut albums that contributed to the world of rock music, of what we know, of what we know of rock now. The next one I have also came out in 1969. Then the next few are still going to be from 69. As you can see, 68 and between 67 and 69, there was so much big debut albums that will form the 70s. Grand Funk Railroad, On Time. This was their debut album. They will go on to be such a big phenomenon there between 70 and 72. The big song on here for me would be Heartbreaker. But there weren't that many big single hits off this album. This was album-oriented rock, where you had to listen to the whole album. That's what all these albums have in common, was that it wasn't just rock music. Isn't just a hit single or 2 or 3 hit songs. It's the whole thing from beginning to end. It's a character of a piece of music. That's what makes this so great. So this was also wonderful. Great guitar solos on here. Some songs are stretched out to 6-7 minutes with so much love and care and passion. Also in 1969 we were introduced to Joe Walsh, who will be such a big star in the 70s when he joins the Eagles, and even with his solo career in the late 70s. But he started off with the James Gang. There he is down here, Joe Walsh, and he was the leader of this band, the James Gang. And this came out in 1969, and it is, the thing with this album is that they're trying so many different genres. Their songs are, a lot of them are 6-7 minute long, and each band member really takes the time to show their craft on extended solos on this album. The song on here that sticks out to me was Nope. Wow, I guess Stop. Again, this was an important album, but there weren't any big hits that were released on here. You had to listen to it as a whole. And this next album here was not a big hit for this band, but I'm talking about it because it was a big... If it wasn't for this debut album coming out and them having the permission to keep going on and on into the 70s and almost inventing, or maybe not inventing prog music, but elevating prog music. We talked about Genesis in 1969. This album is completely different from what we're going to hear later on, even as early as the early 70s, between 72 and 75. But this was the beginning. In fact, it's called Genesis from Genesis to Revelation. On this one, we Phil Collins is not there yet. Phil Collins will be introduced on their third album, but this was a big album because it was a step forward to what was to come. Peter Gabriel was introduced to the world on this album with his voice and his lyrics and his ideas. This is a good album. And then I make this the closer of the 60s. This was also released in 1969. A lot of these are trying to put us close according to the month and year release, so I took a lot of care. But Chicago's Transit Authority. This was jazz rock fusion double album. This was another debut album, debut solo album by Chicago. The guitars on here by Terry Kath, just fantastic. The horns are unbelievable. The vocals, and once again, just like I said about Grand Funk Railroad, the passion put into these songs. The songs on here that were a hit, does anybody really know what time it is? Was the big song on this album. There's the front of it, small, but I like it nice and making a big statement there. So now we're moving into 1970. We are moving into 1970, the breakup of the Beatles. And so the first solo album, well, I don't know if it's the first solo album because I didn't bring George's out, but I did bring out Paul McCartney's. Hold the phone. Bear with me, everybody. I just popped up with an idea. Nope. Okay. 1970. The breakup of the Beatles. My favorite band, and probably a lot of people's favorite bands, the Beatles. Well, in 1970, they will release solo albums, and I have each. I don't have Ringo's solo album, but here's John Lennon with his solo album along with Yoko Ono and the Plastic Ono Band, I believe. Yeah, the Plastic Ono Band. And the song that sticks out to me on here, there's so much on here, but Mother and Working Class Hero. There weren't that many big hits taken off of this. When it comes to debut albums and hit songs being released, that would belong to George. And we're talking about George, All Things Must Pass. This will be a triple album, I believe. You see, I wasn't ready to pull these out, but I think it's a triple. 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, a triple album. There's so many songs on here that were big. That was a big hit for him. But let's go with My Sweet Lord. Yeah, I'll pick out My Sweet Lord as being the song that was the hit for him off of All Things Must Pass by George Harrison. And then, but of course, Paul, I think Paul was the one that released solo first. This was his solo album. There's the back of it. This one here, he would record at home. This is a home recording. He produced it. He played all the instruments himself, and the standout track on here that would make him a star, a solo star, which, you know, he was going to be a solo star anyway after the Beatles. But Baby I'm Amazed. Is that the title? Yeah, Maybe I'm Amazed. I always get that wrong. I think it's Baby, but it's Maybe I'm Amazed, which kind of changes the whole song, doesn't it? So we're still in 1970. I just wanted to talk a bit about the Beatles solo albums because that's when they broke up. It was a big change in music. The Beatles were no longer there. That safety net, the guidance of the Beatles was no longer there. So what's going to happen going into the 70s? How is music going to react? Black Sabbath, 1970, debut album. The big song on here is the title track, Black Sabbath. Nothing ever heard like this before. This was a whole different genre. This was the introduction of heavy metal. Yes, I know in the late 60s there were, other bands, but this had the sound, had the look, had the feel. This album scared the hell out of people when it came out. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a scary movie that they can hear. And that's what this is. Black Sabbath. The title track. But there's so much stuff going on in the 70s. So much stuff. Eric Clapton will break out of Cream and Cream and the Yardbirds and Blind Faith. I couldn't remember. And he will come out with his solo album, and it's low key and it's fantastic. If you're expecting the guitar hero that we would hear in the 60s, he goes a whole different route. Say, hey, I'm more than just this great electrifying guitar player. I'm also a good songwriter, and I also have a good ear for pop music and pop rock. The song on here, "Let It Grow," love "Let It Grow," and also we will see the debut of the little band from Texas, ZZ Top, incorporating American blues and rock, and incorporating the taste of Texas along with them. 3-piece band. They sounded like a 5-piece band. The song on here, "Somebody Else Shaking Your Tree," a really good song. But there were no big hits off of here. But just the whole album itself was just so good, and it gave way to so much stuff, so many albums in the 70s that ZZ Top would do, and also go into the 80s and do a lot of good on MTV with the Eliminator album, with the videos they would make for Legs and for Sharp Dressed Man. And also what we have here, we were talking about Genesis starting the whole prog rock movement, and it will be continued by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Nothing at that time sounded like Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Right here we're talking about drums, bass, keyboards and drums just going back and just interacting with each other like they've never had before. And the lyrics were so thought-provoking lyrics. So yeah, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, this was the start of them putting their stamp on prog rock for throughout the 70s. Well, almost throughout the 70s, but right there between 70 and 77, man, there were bar none when it came to prog rock there. And what we have next is Steely Dan, a pop rock jazzy kind of band. I know that they had released a motion picture. They did a motion picture soundtrack before this, but this is the actual debut for the band Steely Dan. Can't Buy a Thrill. Such a good album too. Standout track for me on here is still a standout track for me for Steely Dan period, and that's Reeling in the Years. Great song, Reeling in the Years. The guitar solos and just the way that Donald Fagen, his voice and his storytelling, is so great. And after that, we will be introduced to Bachman Turner Overdrive. Hard rock coming out of Canada. Bachman was also in the band The Guess Who, which was already having that kind of success coming out of Canada. But this year would really tear down the doors for him and his brother and Turner. But yeah, their debut album is really good. The song on here, I don't think there's not a song on here that was a big hit, a worldwide hit, but it was just the workman-like rock that was so good for Bachman Turner Overdrive. And in 1973, we'll be introduced to another Southern band along with Allman Brothers, even though they don't sound anything like the Allman Brothers, but they typed them together. Leonard Skinner, the ultimate Southern rock band with thought-provoking lyrics, heartfelt songs, music that would go off the rails at any time. Leonard Skinner, the standout track for me on here would be Free Bird. I love Free Bird. I don't care how many times people make fun of it. I've said this before, but I was talking about Leonard Skinner. When people are at concerts, they're like, hey, play Free Bird. Man, I wish they would. And also in 1973, we'll be introduced to a young singer-songwriter that would go on to do great things in the world of rock, and a great humanitarian, a songwriter, a guitar player, so much passion in his music. even to today. This is Bruce Springsteen's debut album, Greetings from Asbury Park. And the song that sticks out to me on here is going to be Blinded by the Light, his original version. Of course, it will be done by Manfred Mann's band later on in the 70s that will eclipse Bruce Springsteen's. But I love Bruce Springsteen's version as well because I like his folky rock on this album. And music will still remain to be heavy. And rock is getting heavier. We're seeing the progression, aren't we? It's fun to do this in chronological order and not just thrown together. This will be Aerosmith's debut album. You know, the rock on here is fantastic. They are already showing their personality on here. We will be introduced to the song, the balladry of Dream On, which will go on to greater heights after the release. And not just that, but also be a staple for other bands to come afterwards to also have a ballad on their albums, which it seems to be a pattern back in the 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. After their rockin' single off of an album was released, their second one will be a ballad. I don't know if everyone else sees that, but I see it. And in 1973, we will hit another revolution, a phenomenon here in America and across the world. Kids, teenagers, 20-somethings loved this band. Even to this day, this is a very beloved band. Kiss, their debut album. Isn't that an awesome album cover? Just look at it. That's pretty awesome. It's pretty neat. It's pretty badass, I'll say it. And there's the back of it. The standout song on here is probably going to be it's got to be a Strutter. Yeah, Nothing to Lose, Cold Gin, Firehouse. Side 1 was just boom, just introducing themselves. But also Black Diamond. It ends with Black Diamond, and that too was a big song for them at that time. And of course, we know they'll go on to make movies, merchandise, everything they possibly could, and people bought it. They would just go on and, merchandising, and that might even started with Kiss. T-shirts, dolls, whatever you can think of came out because of debut albums like that. And another debut album would be a band that would tour with Kiss in the early days. Rush. And we all know that this album is a staple when it comes to rock music. But this is also very different from what we know of Rush. The hard, heavy prog rock would come after. This can be a straightforward rock album by them. This is their only album with their original drummer. I think his name was John Rustin. And then after that, we will be introduced to the one and only Neil Peart, who we lost to, I believe it was cancer, a couple of years ago. Who crushed the rock community. But yeah, Rush, standout track on here, Working Man, of course. I think it's 7 or 8 minutes long. 7:07 long of just blistering guitar and that bass. Introduced to that unique voice of Geddy Lee, aren't we? After that, we're going to be introduced to AOR Rock. And these guys are still touring today with different members, but still has the voice of oh my god, I can't believe it slipped my mind. Of course, Paul Rogers, the Bad Company. Right here, this will start another kind of rock friendly, rock radio friendly rock music, and it had to be coming out because things were getting pretty weird, and they needed to pull things back because since we had Black Sabbath and Grand Funk and so many other rock bands that were going a whole different direction, radio was being dominated by poppy songs, and along came Bad Company to reintroduce everybody to rock music. Standout track on here, of course, is going to be the self-titled song Bad Company. Good stuff. But also at the same time in 1974 we'll be introduced to Judas Priest, Rock-a-Rolla. I like this album cover. There's not a song on here that really was released that made big strides for them. It was the hard rock community that kept pushing Judas Priest forward without that big rock hit. Without that big radio hit, a la Bad Company and others that had that support. And in 1976, we will be introduced to the one and only Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. This album will come out of nowhere, completely different from anything else that's going on at the time. They will not be associated with Bad Company or Boston or Journey and Foreigner or anything like that. They will be their own entity, pretty much. The songs on here, that's the American Girl. You know, American Girl was a big hit for them. And also Breakdown is also on here. Those were the two hit songs that were released that made Tom Petty who made Tom Petty the Tom Petty we know today. And unfortunately we lost him, and probably once or twice a week it pops into my head that, man, Tom Petty's not with us anymore. But there's a fantastic box set coming out, an big expanded version of Wildflowers that is coming out, and there was already a song released on Apple Music called Angela that was unreleased, and I heard it this weekend, and I love it. It makes me wonder why wasn't this on the album, but it's great. I want y'all to go listen to that now, stream it. This album here by this band, it started off with so much promise, then fizzled out. Boston. The track on here, of course, More Than a Feeling, which was a fantastic song. But this whole album, I talked about it because I think it was in my top 20. Probably was in my top 20. But I talked about it at length when I did the letter B. In fact, part 2 of the letter B's. It's part 2. I had to cut into 3 parts. This album was played on the radio pretty much. Every song was played on the radio. That's how good this album was, and still is today. And I was talking about AOR bands, but they were big in the late 70s. And so was this band, Foreigner, with their debut album, in the same vein as Boston and Bad Company and Journey. But Journey at this time was trying to get their chops as a prog rock band, and then they will change their genre and join the ranks of Foreigner and Bad Company and Boston and so on. But feels like the first time, Cold as Ice, Long Way From Home. This had a lot of big hits. This was a big debut album for Foreigner. That's why it's on this list. It's a good album, and it made a subgenre of friendly rock radio music. And going from friendly AOR rock music, we get to this revolutionary album that just created or added to the creation of punk rock. Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, Of course, the song that sticks out here, God Save the Queen. But there's so much stuff on here. Holidays in the Sun, Liar, Pretty Vacant. Yeah, Liar! But yeah, God Save the Queen was the song off of this album that just catapulted this to worldwide success. Unfortunately, just like Boston, well, Boston's second album's good, but you know, the promise that these bands showed just couldn't push forward. But Sex Pistols will always be known as being part of the punk revolution that came about in the late 70s, and to today, punk music is still very, very relevant. Just that, you know, with this music that's going on today, you just have to look for that punk, and you'll find it. It's same thing with rock music today. You got to go out there and look for it. No one, I mean, the media is not going to come and expose it to you anymore. They're exposing fake, overproduced pop stars. You got to go look for the real stuff. And when you go and look for it, even today, stuff that's coming out of the year 2020 is great. It's just not being given to us anymore. But that's okay, because we still have the richness of all this rock music that's around us. And in 1978, we will be introduced to a band that went strong into the, finished the 70s strong, dominated the 80s, dominated the 90s, fizzled out a little bit in the 2000s, but still nothing can change who they are. Van Halen debut album, we are introduced to the one and only Eddie Van Halen. We're introduced to David Lee Roth. We're introduced to Alex and Michael Anthony, and just this great, bold music that came out at this time. Forget about the AOR sounds that were coming out. This will come out in blister guitar. Just blister guitar. And song on here, of course, let's go with, you know what? Let's do two of them. Of course, this whole album is great beginning to end, but I just want to talk about life-changing songs off a debut album. Running with the Devil, Jamie's Crying, and Ain't Talking About Love. Nah! That will finish the 1970s of debut albums that I have. And we're going to be introduced, we're going into the 80s. Ozzy Osbourne has been kicked off of Black Sabbath, left off the face of the earth, never to return, washed up, a has-been. Hell no! Blizzard of Oz. Nah, Ozzy Osbourne ain't gone. Ozzy Osbourne is relevant today, and he will always be relevant. He just came out with an album earlier this year that's pretty good. But Blizzard of Oz introduced us to the world of Randy Rhoads. Standout song on here, Crazy Train. And this will also start a movement of heavy metal music being commercial, and not, at this point, not giving up to the man, not giving up to the commercialization of it. This is a blistering debut album. Yeah, blistering, as in Blizzard of Oz. Awesome. That will also introduce us to another heavy metal band with their debut album coming out. You know, the 80s were just going to get heavier. Iron Maiden, their debut album with their original singer, DeMarco, right? DeMarco? Paul Di'Anno. Songs on here weren't radio hits, but they're hits in our hearts, aren't they? Running Free, Phantom of the Opera, Charlotte the Harlot, title track Iron Maiden, the song. These guys will be also grouped up with the new wave of British heavy metal. Although they didn't like it, Joe Elliott did not want that kind of staple to their music. But this was their heaviest album made, On Through the Night. This is a workers' man hard rock album. They'll never sound like this again. Produced just perfectly without the overproduction of it. Rock Brigade and Hello America. Hello America really is a great song by them. But yeah, this is a really good album by Def Leppard. And we will go from England and getting away from the hard and heavy rock that we're just talking about to a band that will later on in the late 80s, early 90s, also in the 2000s will come back over and over, not just to release good albums, but to come back to conquer the world. They started right here. U2 with Boy. Again, on this album, there's no songs on here that were hit songs on the radio, but they are hit songs in our hearts. I Will Follow, The Electric Company, Stories for Boys. Yeah, this was such a good album. And this will introduce us also to what they will call like college rock, alternative rock, rock and roll. Rock and roll has a big umbrella, doesn't it? Big umbrella. And we love it all, don't we? Also right here, we talked about Genesis earlier and Phil Collins, but he will go out on his own and make a fine solo career for himself, especially in the 80s, going into the 90s. But this album here, Face Value, was great. Here's the inside of it. But the song on here that will make him a big star will be In the Air Tonight, with his drumming and the lyrics. Just great stuff. Face Value. And now we go to the streets of Sunset Strip in Hollywood in 1982. Rock is coming with so many different genres. They really are. And subgenres. And this will be called just hard rock. Motley Crue with Too Fast for Love. This was a great album. Blistering, punky, hard and heavy. The best song on here is going to be Livewire to me. Livewire has always been one of my favorite songs, and this will catapult them to greater things. But this was such a great album, and they'll never sound like this again. Maybe on Shout at the Devil, but not quite. This is a fantastic one. And from the streets of LA, we're going to the prairies of Georgia, where we're introduced to REM. I got Chronic Town as well. Chronic Town not being a proper full LP. Murmur will be their debut LP, full-length album. Song on here, again, these songs are more in our hearts than they were on the radio. But talk about the passion. In 1983, we will be introduced to another subgenre of rock. Let's call this, well, not let's call this, and what it is. It's called thrash. And it'll be introduced to us into the forefront by Metallica, Kill 'Em All. I told y'all already about the story of the paint on here. When I moved into this house, I was painting and I was listening to this album, and I got paint on the cover and also on the back. But it plays wonderfully. Song on here, oh, man, jeez. Again, these songs were not played on the radio. These are songs that are in our hearts. Four Horsemen, Whiplash, Hit the Lights, No Remorse, Seek and Destroy. Right? Am I right? And we're going back to the streets of Hollywood, Sunstrip, to a band that didn't sound like anybody else on there, but they were grouped with everybody else. Breaking the Chains with Dawkins, with their debut album. And the title track, Breaking the Chains, will be the big song on here. And we're going to stick to the streets of Sunset Strip for the next one. Wasp with their debut album. The song on here, Be Somebody. Be somebody. Oh, I want to be somebody. But this album, beginning to end, it's great. And it's a shame that they're grouped up. Well, I don't think they're even grouped with hair metal or whatever they want to call it. What I call it is hard rock of the 80s. Wasp. Yeah. Then in 1987, this band will also come out, the Sunset Strip of Hollywood. And this album would turn the world on its head. Appetite for Destruction. The standout track, the standout song on here, Welcome to the Jungle, and Sweet Child of Mine. That would make this album worldwide, but let's be honest, beginning to end, this is one of the best albums. But there's also disappointment to this album. Unfortunately, it will be just this, and then Lies is alright, but kind of lazy when you want to follow up this with a live EP, a couple of new songs, and then we're introduced to Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, but the original drummer is gone. And throughout making of Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, also one of the original members will be gone. And then, there was so much promise for this band. And now we're in 2020, and we still have the same output of what I just talked about from an album that's one of the best of all time. And this was their debut album, and they just couldn't follow it properly. It's just, egos, drugs, so much stuff just came in between a band that could have just gone to greater heights. And they're still touring. They get back together, and they're still touring today off of this album. And it's great. Let's move off of the 80s. I got just a couple more albums to go. Because vinyl, I started collecting more CDs at this time. 10 by Pearl Jam. Right there, Pearl Jam 10. This will be part of the grunge movement in 1991. Standout track on here. You could go with Even Flow. You could go with Black. You could go with Jeremy. You could go with Alive. There's so many different ways on that album. And next, in 1994, we will also be introduced to the world of Weezer. One of my favorite bands, Weezer. This is the Blue Album. Standout track will be Undone, the Sweater Song. And Say It Isn't So. Sorry about that little stutter there. And Buddy Holly. It's just a great album from beginning to end, but those were the standout tracks that make this a hit album. And last but not least, what I have on my debut vinyl, The Strokes, doing This Is It. Last Night, and Hard to Explain were hit songs for them that catapulted this album. Right now, again, rock seems to reinvent itself every couple of years. This kind of reinvented that pop rock punk alternative sound that's coming out of New York at the time. The Strokes. Hey, so thanks a lot for sticking with me during this episode of debut albums. We got to talk about how these albums made such a big impact in our world of music and just our world of entertainment. happened for us, and they're still making movements today for the younger generation that are exploring these albums. So I'm really glad that you were able to join me on this episode. I will be making more episodes. I got a new series coming out that is going to be called Vinyl Battles, where I am going to be grouping different groups that came out at the same time and finding out which one is better according to the albums they released to the year. I'll explain it better. I think I have to show it to y'all so that y'all can really see it. So that's going to be interesting how I'm going to be doing that. So please join me, the Blackspinner, on my vinyl collection as I go through my records and I do different things with them. As you saw, I went through my debut albums. And if y'all have seen my episodes, how much I love the double live albums, that'll probably be my next episode where I'll grab all my double live albums, group them together, and do what I do on my channel. So thanks a lot for joining me. Take care of each other and keep on rocking. And I'll see y'all next time, guys.